Welcome to the second of Homestage's Classical Wednesdays. After our wonderful inaugural recital by Brenda Blewett and Julian Godley, we thought it would be quite nice to introduce some of my work as a violinist. In my teens, I discovered the string quartet genre and have absolutely loved it ever since. Along with my colleagues in the Bingham String Quartet, we've been playing through a huge range of repertoire for two violins, viola and cello now for about 30 years. So we thought it would be nice to have a recital from the quartet, and last month we were playing concerts in Wells Next to Sea, then in Cambridge and then in Chichester. And so we took three of the pieces that we were using in those recitals and recorded them in St Nicholas's Church in Wells. And we're going to start with a little piece of Mozart. Now, we all know Mozart. Probably everybody knows Eine kleine Nachtmusik. We're going to play a short piece in two sections, and in June 1788, Mozart added this piece to his own catalogue, and he wrote a short adagio for two violins, viola and bass, for a fugue I wrote some time ago for two pianos. So basically he's taken the original fugue which he wrote for two pianos, he's arranged it himself for string quartet, and then he's added a little adagio introduction to give us the whole piece. One of the things that composers of that era did was write fugues almost as a sort of study and exercise, showing off how good their compositional technique was. We'll talk a little more about the fugue in a minute, but the piece starts with this short adagio. It opens quite grandly in a quite declamatory fashion and alternates between these quite big chords and these wonderful, slow, quiet, smooth sections in between. It's quite chromatic, it's quite adventurous in the harmony. And then we move straight into the fugue, which is started by the cello. So a fugue, for those who may not be quite sure about the form, is where there's a theme that is basically echoed through the instruments. There are quite a few ways that this theme can be dealt with by the composer, and we could do a whole talk on fugue as a form. But suffice it to say, at first you will hear the theme in the cello, it's passed round all the instruments. Again, it's a very chromatic theme, meaning it uses lots of notes outside the official key that the piece is in of C minor. And so, for instance, in the first 4 bars of the first violin part, when I enter, I play all 12 notes of the scale, all 12 semitones of a scale, which is absolutely remarkable for something from 1788. Mozart plays around with the fugue theme. He inverts it, he turns it upside down. He puts different instruments playing the original version and the upside down version at the same time. He gradually, over the course of the piece, builds the tension by putting the entries of the fugue closer and closer together until eventually we have them right 2 notes after each other through all the 4 instruments, followed by a build-up of fast semi-quaver notes, bringing us to the climax of the piece. It's only about 10 minutes long, this piece, but it's 10 minutes of amazing compositional technique and fantastic, I think, musicality and excitement, which I hope you'll enjoy. Mozart's Adagio and Fugue in C minor, Köchel 546. We're now moving on to a set of 5 pieces by the English minimalist composer Michael Nyman. You may think that there's very little connection from Mozart to Michael Nyman, but in fact all these pieces were part of soundtracks for the rather surreal films of Peter Greenaway in the 1980s. And one of the things that Greenaway said to Michael Nyman for a couple of the films was that he wanted them to have the specific influence of certain composers. And so in the second piece, there's a Purcellian ground bass, repeated bass line, which was quite deliberately moulded on the work of Henry Purcell, the Baroque English composer. And for some of the pieces from the film Drowning by Numbers, we have influences of Mozart, in particular the rather famous Sinfonia Concertante for violin and viola, where Nyman has taken very small rhythmic and melodic fragments from that piece and used them to create the soundtrack. This quartet arrangement is by the wonderful musician Phil Toms, and he and I had the idea of not just using a live string quartet but actually pre-recording several lines. So there are 2 and in some cases 3 pre-recorded string quartets plus some pre-recorded MIDI keyboard to sort of expand the soundscape. And so when we're performing these pieces live, we play along with that soundtrack, trying to balance it in such a way that if you are closing your eyes, you're not quite sure what's live and what's pre-recorded. Just trying to get that really listening in a different way to the piece. The first number is entitled Time Lapse and comes from the film A Z and Two Noughts, where it accompanies a time-lapse photography sequence of fruit decaying. It's a great build-up from a very, very simple beginning. The second piece I mentioned earlier has the Henry Purcell style ground bass and comes from a film called The Draughtsman's Contract. It's called The Garden is Becoming a Robe Room. It's a scene where there's lots of bedding and sheets all over the garden, draped over the hedges and the trees. The final 3 pieces all come from the rather dark film Drowning by Numbers. The first is fast and short and is called simply Wheelbarrow Walk. The fourth one has these lovely snippets of the Mozart Sinfonia Concertante in it, and in the film it accompanies some of the characters walking along a beach which has dead fish all over it, and it's simply called Fish Beach. And then the final number, which is one of my favourites, is called Knowing the Ropes. It's fast, got a great build-up and a fantastic melody at the end. So this is the film music suite by Michael Nyman, arranged for string quartet and pre-recorded quartet by Phil Toms. When we're planning programmes with the quartet, we quite like unusual juxtapositions, such as, for instance, Mozart to Michael Nyman. And we were thinking, how shall we end this little recital for you? Well, a few months ago, Marina, our second violin, introduced me to an amazing little arrangement for string quartet of a very, very well known folk tune, if you will. It's been arranged by one of the cellists of the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra, who's called Stefan Konch. It's brilliantly written. It's got a lovely free opening, an almost hymn-like section, folk fiddle riffs in it. It quotes the Dies Irae, that piece that lots of composers have used, from Berlioz to many others in requiems and other orchestral pieces. And it's just huge fun to play. So it didn't take us much persuading to decide that this would be a nice way to end our classical Wednesday for you this evening. I'm not even going to tell you what the name of the piece is. I think you'll be able to guess. It's possible that some of the props around me might give you a clue. I hope you enjoy it.